So, good afternoon, Your Excellencies and distinguished participants. You are all welcome to this very, very important session. It's actually one of the sessions that we all need to really take seriously. I'm going to start on a note by actually pointing out to you what I really mean by being one of the most important sessions here. I think yesterday when His Excellency, the Governor of Lagos State, was speaking, I picked one thing from him. He's really very passionate about human capital development and seeing how everybody can contribute towards that, his vision to move Lagos forward. So let me start, of course, by recognizing and thanking everybody that is in this session. I must, of course, thank our panelists. I'll start, of course, by thanking His Royal Highness. Thank you so much for accepting Lagos State's invitation. I know how you're really very busy. For you being here, it shows how committed you are. And of course, I must also welcome Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, the MD of Sterling Bank, one of the panelists here. I'm not sure whether we have a representative from the Honorable Minister of Education. It will be nice because I know that education is very critical for what we are talking about in terms of human capital development. So let me just start by saying that we all recognize the critical role that human capital development plays in driving sustained economic growth, boosting productivity, and of course, reducing poverty. And talking about shared prosperity, it is important to continuously shine constant light on the poorest segment of the population. And I think it's so important for us to know how to be able to help each other so we have a balance all across. For human capital development, it is not just about government. Yes, government should take the lead, and I think that the government all abroad, whether the federal government and state government, have now realized that they must take the lead. But I think it's all about everybody, and I'm going to finish this particular session on a note of challenge. I'm going to challenge all of us to see how we're going to be part of this process of improving human capital development so as to actually move forward. I think one of the World Bank development reports actually captures this very much by saying that we cannot achieve sustained and inclusive economic growth if we do not have a workplace that is prepared for the future. Let me again welcome all of us, and I must, of course, welcome another member of my panel. That's the Honorable Commissioner for Health for Lagos State, Professor Abayom. You're welcome also to this session. So I'm going to really, I think it should be about my panelists. They are going to help us in setting the tone. I'm just supposed to just welcome us, and I must tell you about the vision that Nigeria has set. Ambitious, people call it, but I think it's achievable. I'll set it so that we'll all see what we're going to use as basis of discussion. And we said that the vision is clearly to have healthy, educated, and productive Nigerian for globally competitive nation by 2030. I must say that 2030 is on purpose, so as to be able to ascribe and be in line with development projects and plans all over the world. And we have set out the human capital development goal under 3 thematic areas, being health and nutrition, education, and labor force. That's what we should focus on right now in the next 50 minutes that we have. So now I'm going to start again by calling on His Royal Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi to start. Your Royal Highness, sir, are you there?
Okay, now you've unmuted me. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you so much again for, I'm thanking you on behalf of Lagos State now for agreeing to speak. I know that human capital development is your passion, and we were speaking online. I said that you really know how to sing that song so well because of your passion and how convinced you are that once we get this right, we're on that path of development on in this part of our work. So I'm going to leave you for another 5 minutes to take us through your thoughts on shared prosperity, and especially to relate it to what we need to do. Let's make it as practical as possible, solution-based. We all know what the problems are, but I think it's time for us to have a catalog of solutions, and we shall all begin to run with it. So over to you, Your Royal Highness.
Thank you very much, Yosola, and thank you for the invitation to speak on this panel. For over a decade, the World Bank has been speaking about human capital development. I think the World Bank started a few decades ago talking about the importance of infrastructure and infrastructural development. And then in the last decade or two, came to the realization that the greatest driver of economic development and prosperity is really investment in the human being, which is actually, when you think of it in economic terms, very straightforward. I mean, GDP growth, after all, can be broken down into the growth in the population and the growth in per capita income. So the best way to achieve long-term sustainable growth is to invest in broad improvements in the productivity of the human beings within a country. Sub-Saharan Africa has had a problem in terms of lagging behind in human capital, and this problem has been exacerbated by COVID. It's been projected that COVID will reduce economic activity in Sub-Saharan Africa by 3.3%. It will cost at least $115 billion in output this year alone. It will push 40 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa into extreme poverty. It will set back progress in building human capital. School closures are expected to affect nearly 253 million students, 253 million students in Sub-Saharan Africa, with only agriculture expected to contribute positive economic growth. The World Bank has published its Human Capital Index. And when we look at the World Bank analysis of Nigeria, we see how far behind we are. Nigeria is actually behind not just middle-income countries, but sub-Saharan country peers. According to the World Bank's HCI, the Nigerian brief, a child born in Nigeria today will be only 36% as productive as he or she could be when they grow up if they had complete education and full health. Now, this index is computed based on analysis of 3 factors: survival, so will children born today survive to school age? School, how much school will children complete and how much will they learn? And health, will they leave school in good health, ready for further learning and work? So when we're told that only a child can only reach 36% of his potential, it's partly because we're losing on all those 3 counts. We have a very high infant mortality rate. Many of our children die before they get to school age. When they go to school, they do not learn much and they do not complete their education, and health outcomes are not very good. As chairman of the board of trustees of the Nigerian Society of Nutrition, I've had the sad responsibility of looking at these data on nutrition for a number of years. And I'm not sure that we have disseminated these data widely enough. And I had a presentation at the National Economic Council on nutrition where we spoke to the governors. And many of the governors were taken aback by what they saw in their states. We have states in this country where 66% of under 5s are malnourished. We have states with large populations like Kano, where about 50% have chronic malnutrition. The impact of malnutrition on cognitive capacity of children, the impact of malnutrition on their education is well documented in the science. And this is one area where the country needs to look at and invest. The educational system itself Unfortunately, we're losing a lot in human capital as a result of COVID. There's a lot of on-the-job training, skills acquisition that we've lost because of lockdowns and because of people not being able to be in gainful employment. But we're also losing because we have not looked critically at the curriculum to try and address the needs of an economy at this level of development. So broadly, I think if we were to lay the outline for this conversation, I would say we need to discuss, one, the area of health and nutrition for the child and what we can do to improve that. I think we need to look at the curriculum that we have with education. Is it relevant? Does it give the children the preparation they need for this century? Does it prepare them for gainful employment? Or are we teaching them, I mean, why are we producing all these graduates who are unemployed? We have a high level, we have a need for human capital, and yet we have so many people holding university degrees who cannot find jobs. So are we educating people for our economy, or are we educating them for something else? And finally, the general investment in health. And while the private sector has a big role to play, certainly this is one area where the government has to take full responsibility. Reports say Nigeria, for example, spends 0.5% of its GDP on health, only 0.5%, and that's one of the lowest in the world. We spend less on health and less on education per capita than countries like Ghana, countries like South Africa, countries like Kenya. We spend so much money on things that are not priorities. I've been speaking for years on basically the priorities we've chosen for ourselves. For decades, we decided it was better to spend billions and billions of dollars providing cheap fuel than providing education and healthcare. We've spent money on infrastructure that is not tying into production and productivity. And therefore, we have to begin from the government budget, from government priorities, and from what signals are set. It's one thing for the government to say we are committed to human capital. It's one thing for the government to say we're committed to education. The question is, when you look at the budget and you're spending 4% of your budget on education, what does that say about your commitment to education? What does it say about your commitment to healthcare? So the private sector follows the guide of government, follows the lead of government. When government invests in education, when government invests in healthcare, the private sector will follow. These are, I think, the opening remarks I would like to make, and I would like to listen to the panel, and let's see how the conversation goes from here. But thank you very much, and I hope we'll have a very fruitful conversation.
Thank you very much, Your Royal Highness. Thank you for setting that tone. I must, of course, recognize the Honorable Commissioner for Education in Lagos State. I think you're on this platform. I'm going to, of course, call upon you as we go along. But before I call on Mr. Abubakar Suleiman for his own opening remarks, I think it will be important for me to also help us, maybe like way of teasers, let us understand what are the other things that is really very critical for us. You mentioned one thing, Your Royal Highness, that is important for government to set the tone, perhaps take the lead, and the others can follow. And in this vein, perhaps a preliminary list of interventions has been identified across all these thematic areas. I think it's important for us is step by step, whether health, education, and labor force, and see how to be able to have a structured conversation. For the health and nutrition, perhaps it will be important for us, since we're talking about solutions, to look at how we can operationalize the basic health fund. We also need to, of course, talk about the primary family planning program, and to see how we can have an effective financing system for all the various health interventions that we're talking about, and of course to see how we can leverage the private sector for the purpose of health and nutrition. And for education, you're right, Your Royal Highness, talking about how we can revise the curriculum, and of course, see how we can be more effective in the teaching style, and to how to roll out the girls' education intervention. This is really very important, and of course for the marginalized boys. For the labor force and skills, I think we need to improve our strategies. I think in one of the sessions, they started off by saying that it is time for us to focus more on technical and vocation training rather than just on being medical doctors and all. It's time for us to see how we can focus on this. I think we have a lot to learn from a place like Singapore, who they always say that their industrialization was mainly focused first on how to improve technical education. And we need to improve access to job market information, not just talking about this employment, and to see how we can assist SMEs financially by providing access to credit and, of course, technically assist them. I'm just giving us this preliminary list of interventions so that either by the panelists or the other participants online, we can be structured and see what type of solutions we're preferring for the purpose of improving human capital indices. I'm going to call on you now, Mr. Abubakar, to start, but of course to prepare us with what His Royal Highness said in terms of COVID, how we know that it has created a multitude of challenges for us in Nigeria, but also important to know that it also provides a chance for us to accelerate certain intervention, some of this intervention that I have spoken about. So I'm going to leave that over to the Commissioner for Health later on. Well, Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, the MD of Sterling Bank, maybe I'll just leave it to you to provide some opening remarks. And of course, please, like I said, let's focus, because we need to have a rich catalog of solutions that we have that we are giving to Lagos State. I don't want to stop now before I need to mention that we are now in that stage of transformation across all the 36 states to make sure that they are also aligned with what we have set the strategy at the national level to see how we can improve human capital development. Lagos State has been doing well, joining and making sure that they have all those their interventions, they are marking up and ticking off for me, because we've created like a peer review learning mechanism so we can see the transformation that is happening all across the states of Nigeria. So Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, over to you now. Can you help us by opening and telling us exactly, relating both the shared prosperity and human capital development? Over to you now.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I'm not going to repeat any of the things that yourself and His Royal Highness have spoken about, so I will move on to things that I believe has not yet been spoken about. A very good friend of mine and someone who is transforming education in Canada, called Rudnick, once said that we should not optimize obsolescence. So if we genuinely want to make a difference in human capital development in Nigeria, we should actually stop trying to optimize things that are proven to be obsolete or cannot work. And that's where I start from. I will start by posing a question. And this is a question I pose every single time I have an opportunity. Why is it that an investment in human capital, an investment in a child, an investment in training a doctor is treated in government books as an operating expense, whereas an investment in road or in buying a vehicle is treated as capex? As we all know, we think that capex is good, and so when you tell people that you are spending money on capex, they celebrate it, and that opex is sometimes seen to be profligate. So let's ask ourselves, why is it that human capital, money that is spent on human capital, is not treated as capex? It says a lot about our mindset towards education and towards building human capital. I think that there should be at least 3 categories of government expenses. I think we are all very comfortable with the idea of investing in physical infrastructure that is treated as capital expenditure. I think we also understand the need to have operating expenses to keep the government running. But I think there should be an investment expense, which speaks to us putting money in things that are going to create as much value as our capex but the values are in the form of humans that would run the economy of the future. I think if we don't mentally separate the money we spend on human capital and treat it like capital expenditure, we will continue to make a fundamental mistake from government. The second comment I want to put out there, it's that there is a wrong assumption that we have inherited, that for you to become a useful human resource, you have to first of all go through education. So we've lined it up such that you have 15 years or 20 years of education, then you now move into the workforce. The school system that we know today is excellent for academia, where you go and you learn, and after many years of learning, you start to contribute academic work. But if we recall, the people who actually build our societies do not make that dichotomy. Most of the skills that build society, both the learning and the doing, are highly integrated. And so for me, carrying the university system the way it is today, which says that you do nothing for 15 years or 20 years, and then after that you start to work, I think there's a fundamental defect in that. We need to begin to think of education as something that you do, you learn while you are doing. And that is exactly how the vocational roles that we talk about, that's how they've progressed in the past. And even professional roles today, like banking or like the legal profession or even the medical profession, used to be a combination of learning and doing. And this is important because increasingly the world is changing so fast that by the time you finish learning and you move to the real world, so much has moved. I think these are important conversations we should have about how education is delivered. To round up the opening session, I'm of the view that the educational system we have today cannot deliver the human resources that we need, even for today, let alone for the future. I'm of the view that the resources that we have today, both public and private sector, is not sufficient for us to run that old system. We will not be able to provide education for everyone if we insist on providing it the way it is done. I'm also of the view that the number of people that we have today that are qualified to teach are so insufficient to meet the need of the society, and that it takes too much time to turn people into teachers in the current form. So we must rethink who a teacher is and where teaching goes on. And finally, I'm of the view that of all the reasons that government borrows money, none is as important as borrowing money to invest in the future of our children. This is because not only does investment in human capital yield the highest return over time, it is also true that the repayment of every amount that is borrowed today is likely to come from the children that we're training today. So why not borrow money for the purpose of securing their future rather than treat investment in education and human capital development as something that we do long after we've taken care of other important things. And of course, His Royal Highness was right in saying that the government must set the tone, but I'm of the conviction that at the end of the day, far too much resources is in the private sector for education and human capital development not to become primarily a private sector driven activity. I think the government should set the tone. I think the government should be responsible for providing rules, but at the end of the day, we must find a way to commercialize every aspect of human capital development so that it can scale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar. Thank you for your introduction. I think we already have the Honorable Minister for Education online now. Honorable Minister, sir, you're welcome. I'm not sure at what point you joined, but we started off with having His Royal Highness actually speak through some of his thoughts, and I introduced as the coordinator for the Human Capital Development, but that's not my role here. It's just to moderate and see how we can all speak the same language in terms of human capital development. We're going to go to you shortly so that you can just tell us some of your thoughts. When I opened up, I gave us the key things that we think that for us to improve on human capital development in terms of the initial interventions, to roll out interventions for marginalized boys. We're talking about the girls' education, how we're going to revamp the NCE, and of course, teachers' development, not taking away from the need to revise the curriculum and methodology of teaching. So your Honorable Minister, sir, good afternoon. So I'll leave the floor over to you to set the tone and give us some of your thoughts on the Human Capital Development Program. Like we said, we want to be able to talk about solutions. I know that your ministry has been doing quite a lot, so I'll let you start. But of course, all the members that are joining virtually, it would be nice to actually hear from you as well. Perhaps if you do not want to talk, you can post it in the chat and we'll see how to be able to read it and address it. Or perhaps you have solutions for us. Honorable Minister, sir, over to you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I am delighted to be part of this round table discussion, or a table discussion around improving actually how we make human beings into appropriate manpower. And yes, you are correct. Charge nationwide for Lagos State alone, and that's the convergence, the work that when you listen to your governor speak about what Governor Lateef Jakonde did in the era of when he was governor in the 80s through to the 90s, as well as what was done by Chief Awolowo in the days of Western region. They laid the what will be like a foundation for the aggregation of human capital development. Essentially, what does human capital development seek to do? It seeks to take a body, whether it into somebody. Now, we have a system of doing that. Well, that is what we go to school for. But like I think the speaker before last pointed out, that is not the only way. There are many ways with which you can infuse into a person some sort of knowledge, ability, intellect for the person to be able to be a productive member of society, which is at the point where the person becomes some sort of manpower. This manpower expresses itself as ability to do and to perform and to participate in the economy. In our economic variable world today, you require minimum of a literacy skill, a numeracy skill, and perhaps a doing skill. Now, the doing skill has become further uptaken in the world because it is apparent that everybody needs to be able to participate in the economy by doing something or be able to participate somewhere. So right now, it would not be true to say that the path of education is the only way. It is the most known way. And through that path, you can formally put everybody on course to get in to become somebody. However, the President of the Federal Republic has just signed an approval for us to begin what is called the alternate school program. Now, this seeks to address exactly what the formal education system is unable to do, which is take some sort of learning skill or education to those who for some reason cannot or will not or have not attended any of the formal ways to educate somebody. Now, even with the formal ways to educate somebody, there are sources in the system. First of all, it is dependent on the ability and suitability of the teachers. Because it's not enough to know something. You must have the pedagogical skill to be able to impact it. And that is the essence of getting teachers in the fray. It is the same with how we look at what our country's manpower needs are. Fortunately for us, the Vice President who heads the Skill Council, and we have proposed, and he has accepted, that we do a national labor skill gap audit, which is the first thing any nation needs to address. When you hear in developed countries that people are filed for unemployment benefits, what they refer to is around the 774 local governments in Nigeria, for instance, there should be a database of who is out of job, who is not working, and what that person may otherwise be interested in doing, so that government can at least be informed in the efforts that is going to probably be making towards making somebody acquire some sort of knowledge. Right now, everybody's talking about digital skills. You need to have a database of those who are interested, who fall into the category, who have the minimum requirement to do that. It is the same thing for the universities. We've just licensed 20 new private universities. It's not enough to just license them, but there has to be people who are interested in attending them and have the requisite skills. It's the same thing with the proliferation of vocational centers around the country. There are nearly 22,000 of them, and yet we are unable to produce the kind of manpower we require. Over the years, even from my years at the National Assembly, from 1999, we've built over 45,000 primary health care centers, and yet less than 6,000 of them are operational. So really, it's not just about building the infrastructure, but the human infrastructure is the manpower always ahead, because there's a convergence of human factors to run the woman who has the SDG program right now was a former deputy governor in Lagos. And each of the centers that they built in their time have been turned to places where you could use for vocational training. That is not the same thing that has happened in other states. Other states have simply abandoned theirs. So there is a need for Lagos, who has led the way, to continuously show us what they intend to do. We at the federal government, as a federal government, are aptly ready and always available to partner with Lagos as our flagship state to be able to show it big, and then look at what needs to be added with the emergence of new technologies, leveraging on what is available and the lines and the networks, as well as looking at what are limitations in some parties going on. But then, like you know, all work leads to further work. So we must continue at it and help ourselves re-energize. I will be listening in to be able to take and be part of it. I don't want to prescribe or dictate or say what must be done. The idea behind the table discussion around this time, especially over this period, is to extract from our populace and some guidance as to what government needs to do to make sure things are better, and explain what it is that we are doing, so they can also get a feed into it. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you for.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much for that intervention. We're already 40 minutes into our session, so we need to actually move quickly so that we'll be able to hear from other members of our audience. I'm going to move quickly. One of the key things that I took from you is the need for this to happen throughout the country. That's the transformation all across the states of Nigeria. And I think this is one of the things that I started off with by saying that we must all be prepared for it, and it must happen all across the states of Nigeria, because one state cannot, once one state is down, we're all down in Nigeria. So let's see how we can collectively work on this. I'm calling upon you now, the Honorable Commissioner for Health for Lagos State, Professor Abayomi. I'm calling upon you now, and I'm going to allow you to talk about some of the transformation around health in Lagos. But of course, you must pay attention to the critical things that we have all identified, all the speakers, in terms of what we need to do to move us forward in terms of health and nutrition. So, Honorable Commissioner, over to you now.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think what struck out from the preceding conversations we've had from His Royal Highness and from Suleiman Abubakar and the Honorable Minister is the word human capital, and I even heard human infrastructure. So I think, you know, as Lagos State, we sincerely recognize that that human capital is very important. We have a youth bulge in Lagos, and we know that that bulge is going to get even bigger. And that is the bulge that's going to contribute to the economy of the state. We want to produce contributors. We don't want to produce a crop of young people that are dependent on the state or are not contributing to the development of the state. So from the health perspective, you know, the human being starts as a fetus, you know, as a young embryo inside the womb of a mother. And we all know the concept of neurocognitive development. His Royal Highness mentioned that. So the indices that help you to give an idea of how well your population or your youth bulge are being nourished is what we call the stunting index. And a stunted child tells you that that is the outward physical manifestation of malnutrition. So if you can already see external manifestations of malnutrition, then what else is happening internally to the brain, to the ability to comprehend, to create a child that has an IQ that can collectively work in the interest of economic development for the state. So we're very, very particular that we should start this human infrastructure strategy in the pregnant mother. So where would we do this? We need to make sure, first of all, that all pregnant women in Lagos are receiving antenatal care at our primary platform, which is the primary healthcare delivery facilities. The mother needs to nourish the child in the womb, and when the child is born, the mother is still the key nutritional agent for the child, because the child is going to breastfeed for the recommended numbers of months. So this whole process, and then we go into the neonatal or the young child stage, you know, before we deliver the child to my counterpart in the Ministry of Education. So what we have to do is give you a child that can learn, a child that is going to benefit from the services that you're so desperately trying to improve in the education system. Then, you know, so the primary health care is a critical priority for us in Lagos State. It is the bedrock of our health infrastructure. The primary health care goes down into the grassroots area. Everybody in the community should know a mother that's pregnant. Is she getting enough nutrition? Is she going for antenatal care? The child is born. Is the mother going through the recommended breastfeeding program? Is the mother taking, because she's feeding two people. So she has to feed herself and she has to feed the neonate or the fetus or the young child. So we, coupling with the national, the Lagos State Insurance Scheme, if we always say in Lagos that the primary healthcare and the insurance scheme are Siamese twins, they work together, because it's a way of ensuring that everybody in Lagos has access to good primary healthcare. And it's not just confined to the public service. You know, there are more private facilities in Lagos than public facilities. And as a government, we need to be the policy laying down agent. We need to be the enabler. We need to create the environment and the principles of ensuring that we understand that this human infrastructure, and I really like that word, human infrastructure, if we can start thinking of human beings as capital infrastructure, you know, they are the bedrock of what we're going to use to propel Lagos into the 21st, 22nd century, the fourth and the fifth industrial revolutions. So now we know what the role of health is. COVID has shown us very clearly that health is not only an economic issue, but it's also a security issue. And COVID is an acute shock. It's a sudden shock that threatened Lagos State and the rest of the world. So we know now that you can't separate health from the economy, from security. And so when you've got this child that has gone through whatever kind of vocational training or university training or some skilled up capacity, it's important now that we don't disrupt the environment from a health perspective and allow weak health infrastructure systems to threaten this workforce. So now COVID has grounded many economies, has set up an environment for insecurity, breakdown of law and order. Again, that was a health issue. So we're looking at health contributing to this human capital, this human infrastructure, both at the beginning of the process and at the end of the process to ensure that we can deliver a sustained economic strategy for the state. So it's important that we recognize these differences, that we focus on the primary healthcare platform, both in the public and the private sector. We also concentrate on child spacing, birth control, and ensuring that the mothers are able to look after their young ones, both in utero and from the moment they're born into this world. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, thank you for that. I'm still going to come back to you. I know you were... Honorable Commissioner, is this still on?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. I thought you were... Are you still speaking? I can't hear you. I don't know whether others can hear you.
Yes. I'm just giving some opportunity for my counterpart in education to respond.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. Okay, I was going to just prepare you that I'm going to still have you talk about some of the positive things that COVID has done, especially as it relates to some of the strengthening of some of the things, the health system that you have in Lagos. But you'll take that after we listen to the Honorable Commissioner for Education. Honorable Commissioner for Education, can we please hear you about and also listen to your thoughts on what we need to do, especially in the education sector, particularly Lagos State, to actually move forward to develop, to accelerate human capital development in Nigeria. Over to you, Honorable Commissioner.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here. And I think I totally enjoyed all the contributions before me. I would like to focus attention on some things. I think I must thank the MD of Sterling Bank for saying something I've been thinking about but just was never able to put into words, and that is we should not optimize obsolescence. So what is happening now is that essentially our educational system, as we have found out as a result of COVID and the realities around us, is actually becoming obsolescent if it's not already, sorry, it's actually becoming obsolete if it's not already obsolete. So, and that's because at the end of the day, when we turn out graduates from the system, whether, when they come up through the ranks from early years, primary, secondary, tertiary, we find that many of our graduates are actually not able to function in the environment in which they find themselves. So clearly there is some dysfunction about the system. And I think this, the COVID and a lot of other things have given us an opportunity to be able to make changes. And so let me talk about one or two things. First of all, I think we really have to address why we are sending children to school. What is our vision? What's the point at the end of the day? I always ask people, why go to school? Why are you going to school? Is it to get a job at the end of the day? Isn't it to be able to function effectively in society? So that's why we should have the vision. I think the vision of our SUBEB, I always piggyback on that vision. It says, no child left behind. It just says that every child deserves an opportunity. And my worry is that we are not giving enough options in the present system as it is constituted, and we really have to rethink. That's why the next session that I'm in is we have to rethink, reimagine education. So I think, first of all, we have to agree that we have to give every child options. It's not everybody. Our system now, our educational system, especially primary, secondary, is focused on sending children to university, focused on them passing WAEC and then going on to university. But that's not going to happen. It has never happened, and it's not going to happen now. What is going to happen is that a certain percentage will be able to go on to university, which is fine. But what about the others? Because when you look at something like, 40% passed WAEC, I never look at the 40% alone. They're important, and we should support them in their next level. But I have to look at the 60% for whom the gate has effectively closed. And that's why I think one of the things that we have to look at in the future is, what are we going to teach? Who is going to teach? And where are we going to teach? How are we going to organize all this? So what are we going to teach? In order to give all children in the state, all children, private, public, rich, poor, girls, boys, children with, no matter what you do, Prof, some children are going to have learning challenges. So we'll try and cope with that. We know you've done your best, but we'll take them all the same. So children with challenges and so on. So how do we ensure that they can reach their full potential and be useful members of society, useful to themselves and to their families? And that's why I'm hoping that we'll get some strategies out of here. One strategy that we've been thinking about in the ministry is that why don't we give options within our school system, so that if you want to go into academia, into university and so on, do WAEC and move on. But in the same school, when we find that, especially in many of our public schools, the majority are not going to do that, why aren't we giving them options? So we are thinking about making many of our schools comprehensive schools, where you go to school, you must learn basic literacy and numeracy skills. Those are important in any career that you choose to find yourself. Years ago, I took my house help then to a tailor, and she said she couldn't teach her, that she cannot read. I said, what does she need? She said, yeah, she's going to take measurements. And of course, we all know now, you cannot be a fashion designer if you are not literate. Instagram is there, the internet is there, and you cannot take advantage of that unless you're educated. So she said, no, I can't take this girl, she's not educated. So I know that we must teach them basic literacy, numeracy skills. We also have to teach them things like, what you call integrate the 21st century skills, which we've been trying to do over the past 1 year with our curriculum, insisting that when you are teaching, you have to think about the skills that are essential for success in the world they are going to live in. Teamwork and collaboration. Not everything is cheating and so on. You have to teach them to work together in teams. They have to be critical thinkers. They have to be problem solvers. They have to be innovators. They have to have the right digital literacy, not the ability to Yahoo, but the ability to use technology for their own productivity. And of course, you have to teach them the skills of personal leadership so that they are able to go out. Leadership is not positional alone. Leadership is also influence and what you can do within your own little community. So we've got to integrate all these into the curriculum. I think so when people say, what do we teach? I think beyond subjects, we have to teach so many skills. And I remember the Honorable Minister saying, you have to teach literacy, numeracy, and work-related skills. Then I would add that you also have to teach attitudinal skills so that they can be successful. So what are we teaching? Who teaches? Again, I remember I took from one of the comments, why does it take so long to train a teacher? Why can't there be multiple pathways to go into teaching? You've seen in many countries, people have retired. People have retired from other industries. Why can't we train them? We don't have enough teachers. That is obvious. And and even the teachers that we have, because I must say, with all due respect to colleges of education, I find that in many cases, they are not really, they don't hit the ground running. You can't take in a young person. I would never take somebody, if I were running a private school, I would never take a young person straight from school and take them to class, because I know that they don't have the skills to teach yet. We still have to do a lot more with them. So we need to address our teacher training curriculum. Of course, who teaches? We have to have multiple pathways. Who teaches? And where do we teach? I think that is critical, and that is what COVID has shown us. That school is not about a building. And that is why I loved it when he said, why are funds, the MD Sterling said, why are funds not called investment? Because we have to invest in technology, in integrating technology into teaching and learning. Integrating technology, the appropriate technology, so that every child can learn. There are too many out-of-school children. There are too many children who are not learning in school. So how do we use this really powerful tool? So I think that is also another strategy that I would always, that I think we have to invest in significantly. But how can we do all this? No matter the budget of the state, and everybody is excited when they see their budget. I always tell the story of somebody who sat in front of me when the budget was read, and he jumped up and hugged me so happily that, oh, you have now, you know, this is great. We will spend it together now. How are we going to spend this? Most of it goes to salaries because we are labor intensive. So most of it's going to salaries. The proportion coming for capital and other investment is small. So we still need support, and that is where I will talk about funding. How do we work with the private sector? How do we work with NGOs? How do we work with development partners so that we all come together with this vision that at the end of our educational system, every child will have an option. Every child will provide such an environment that will optimize their ability to do whatever it is they want to do in life. But to do that, we do need these collaborations. And I think that was really what I wanted to say. I hope the teachers talk too much, so forgive me. Thank you.
That we actually just have 10 minutes more. I thought we were going to be here till 1:15. So that's saying that it's time now to start rounding up. And oh, there's so much to say, but there's no time. And I'm going to call on His Royal Highness to, in that order, to try and help us in rounding up this conversation. Then I'm going to go to Mr. Abubakar before I turn on the Honorable Minister of Education to help us in rounding up before coming, if we have time, for the two commissioners for Lagos to put in the perspective of Lagos. Your Royal Highness, please, if you're still there, please, can you just help us in rounding up? I made very useful comments and I made very useful notes when you were speaking about the need for us in this part of the country to really now start recognizing human capital. I want you to take it further by telling us one or two or three things that you think we should be doing, especially to Lagos State. Tell them what they need to do by tomorrow to see how they can contribute towards improving human capital development. 2 or 3 things, Your Royal Highness.
Thank you very much, Yosola, and I'd like to thank everyone who's spoken. I'm happy to see that we recognize that in order to deal with this problem, we've got to start thinking of human beings differently from how we've looked at them before, see this as a long-term investment, and also change. I've heard from the Honorable Commissioner for Education, Lagos State, the comments around a new curriculum and comprehensive schools, and these are precisely the kinds of recommendations that are being made. The federal government has already been focused on nutrition, at least as far as school feeding is concerned. But one thing we need to look at, and I've said this before, Yosola, I'm sure you are present in meetings, and this has been alluded to by the Honorable Commissioner for Health, is that sometimes by the time these children get to school, it's too late. We've got to think of nutrition before they get to school. And so that's extremely important for that program to be expanded to how do you deal with that. And very often at that level, it is not so much spending money on providing food, so much as investing in education and awareness and engagement through antenatal care, through conversations for people to understand exactly what they need to give their children. On a more general level, I think that we also have to recognize that Nigeria is one country, but the different parts of the country have these problems to different degrees, and you've got to address a number of issues. One of the areas I've been engaged with in the North in the last few years is the whole question of the structure of the family. the idea that people can marry any number of wives they want without any kind of regulation on their ability to maintain those families, to produce a number of children they can produce without being able to feed them and educate them. And this is something that basically is completely antithetical even to Islamic law. And I don't know why, but there is a mindset against implementing the appropriate regulations in Islam, which is that you do not build up families you cannot maintain, and you do not abandon this responsibility. So it's fine, we can continue preaching, and we can tell the government to spend more money on education, but if people are going to produce 20, 30 children without being able to educate them and maintain them, the government cannot keep up with that pace. So I think people need to understand that they have that responsibility. And you've got to look at the family structure, child spacing, family planning, child rights and the responsibility of parents. And these are social issues that need to be addressed, and they're critical to human capital outcomes. I will stop there, but I think beyond spending money and beyond the budget, the idea of education, awareness, regulation, and the mindset of people will need to be addressed, and we've got to look at local issues sometimes, and there are variations in different parts of the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, can you just leave me on, can you just unmute me for the rest of the time? I'm going straight now to the Mr. Abubakar Suleiman. And then the Honorable Minister, you will round up. So quickly, in 1 minute, can you just round up 2 or 3 things that you think we must focus on? You said one that everybody has spoken about, and we'll take note of that. Please, 2 or 3 things that we must focus on so as to be able to accelerate human capital development in Nigeria. Over to you, Mr. Abubakar, and next, the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start by reaffirming what I've always said. Every parent is a teacher. Every mother, every father is a teacher. Unfortunately, we do not believe, or we have not made any investment in making them effective teachers, even though they end up spending far more time with the children, and in many cases are more convincing in teaching. So there are millions and millions of women and sometimes men who have dedicated their time to looking after the household. They are teachers. It doesn't take a lot to turn them to effective teachers. I think we should look in that direction, and we'll be amazed at how much progress we can make. Secondly, I do not believe that there is any child whose education is not funded or cannot be funded. The idea that we do not have enough money to fund education is a misnomer, because any country that has the capacity to borrow money, of all the reasons to borrow, none is more compelling than investing in the education of the people who are going to pay back that money. So my view is that with the right and appropriate structure, there is enough money to provide the education that every single person requires to be a productive member of society. Because it's a simple investment, it's one of the investments that is most certain to pay back, and is one that the government should be willing to put its own balance sheet behind, either by offering guarantees or offering some kind of assistance. But I think that there is enough commercial money for every child to be able to access funding to get the kind of education they need to be economically viable. And the last comment is that the government should always seek, and I think must seek, to fund the education of the future generation, but they don't have to provide the education themselves. The process of providing education is something that, in our experience, is best handled if you decentralize it and give it to different private entities and then hold them accountable, because it is a complex process, and the more the future becomes less predictable, the more likely that a government-centered education will be obsolete and will not change fast enough to address the need of the future. We have various examples. We are working with Decagon today to train software engineers in 6 months, and all the ones that we've trained are employed within 30 days. We are working with Nextford today to provide a 3-year path to graduate education while the students are actually being employed for work experience. So after 3 years, you have 3 years worth of work experience, and you have a graduate education. The opportunities are many. They can be driven in the private sector. We just need government to support that process.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Abubakar. Sorry, we're going to have to really need to round up now. Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, I know you're still speaking. We really have to round up now. I'd like to.
No, I have rounded up.
Before I go, like I said, I'm going to. Yes, I'm going to throw us. I'm going to have to stop you because I've just been prompted that we have to go. I'm just to throw a challenge. You know, like I said when we started, I said this is not just about government. It's a collective thing. Private sector, everyone. What do we need to do? We have an initiative in the core working group which a street. You live in a street. Look for a school. Look for a healthcare. It doesn't need to be. It's not about big infrastructure, big healthcare system. Even if it's just a table, let's see how we contribute to this human capital development. You are part of it. We have set out like these 16 interventions that I rolled out when I started. We want us to see work together with the commissioners for elections in your state, with the local government chairman, work together with them and see how to improve human capital development. Recognizing we must also, I don't want to end without talking about youth engagement, that we need to right now to be able to engage the youth, make sure they are part of this conversation, because growth in youth population portends either of two things: huge workforce that possibly transforms the state, or a large army of idle youth. So it is important for us to take the first. Let's begin to engage ourselves. Let's see what we can do. We must round up now. We must thank you very much. Just the final word, the Honorable Minister, if you have a parting shot, and then we're closing this session. Honorable Minister, sir, just something for us, for you to close with. Don't let us forget our challenge. It's important for us to be part of it. Let us all see what we can do to improve human capital development. Honorable Minister, are you there for you to have the last say before we close finally, because they said it's time now. Oh, I don't think the minister is still there. So once again, Your Excellency, Your Royal Highness, and distinguished participants, I'd like to thank us all very much for participating in this. And I must also say that we all recognize that human capital development plays a critical role in our development work. And we've taken so many lessons. All these lessons we will pass on to Lagos State. Lagos State will take the lead in seeing how they implement this, so that, and we'll take this also to the peer review forum that we have in the core working group, so that we're all learning and seeing what we can do to improve human capital development. Again, thank you all very much for participating. Please, if you have questions and comments, I'm sure that Lagos State will be quite pleased to have it. And congratulations, Lagos State, for always taking the lead. Thank you all very much, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.